Your Honor, I do not understand. What did I do wrong? Isaiah Brooks stood in handcuffs, 17 years old. Honor roll. His voice was steady, respectful, the way his parents taught him. Judge Harlan Whitaker did not even look up from his papers. Shut your mouth, boy. You people are all the same animals, every last one of you. A clerk smirked. Someone in the back row held up a phone recording, not to help, to watch. Nobody stood up. Nobody said a word. Life without parole, Whitaker said. Get this thing out of my courtroom. Isaiah's mother screamed. The bailiff grabbed her arm. The judge did not blink. But what nobody in that room knew, not the judge, not the officers, not a single person laughing, was that every one of them would soon wish they could take it all back. See? That moment did not end the way they thought it would. All right, let us get into today's story. Isaiah Brooks sat at the kitchen table with his laptop open and a half-eaten bowl of cereal beside it. He was rehearsing a debate argument, the topic criminal justice reform. He mouthed the words silently, tapping his pencil against the table like a metronome. His mother, Regina, moved through the kitchen behind him. She wore hospital scrubs and her hair pulled back tight. A pediatric surgeon. She packed a turkey sandwich into a brown bag and kissed the top of Isaiah's head on her way past. Your father sends his love, she said. He will call after his meetings. Isaiah rolled his eyes, not with anger, but with the kind of affection only a teenager can disguise as annoyance. He always says that, and he always calls, does not he? She was right. He always did. His father, Marcus Brooks, was away on work. That was all Isaiah ever said about it. Dad travels. Dad has meetings. Dad is important, but does not talk about it. There was a framed photo on the hallway wall. Marcus in a dark suit, shaking hands with officials at some ceremony. Isaiah passed it every day without stopping. It was just Dad being Dad. Their home was modest. Clean floors, warm light, a couch with a blanket thrown over one arm, 3 photos above the TV, Isaiah in a cap and gown from middle school, the family at the Grand Canyon, and a candid shot of him laughing with his arms around his mother's neck. This was a home where someone was loved. You could feel it the moment you walked through the door. That evening, Isaiah helped his elderly neighbor carry grocery bags from her car to the front porch. She handed him a butterscotch candy. He thanked her and slipped it in his pocket. He texted his best friend, Jamal Cole. Movie marathon tonight. I am bringing the chips. Before bed, he read 2 pages from a civil rights memoir and underlined a sentence about dignity. Then he closed the book and fell asleep. That was Isaiah Brooks. That was the boy the system was about to destroy. Now, let me tell you about the world he lived in. Richmond had a history, the kind nobody puts on a tourism brochure. Racial tension in the police force stretched back decades. A use of force incident had sparked protests downtown. A black man pinned to the pavement. Cell phone footage. Outrage. Candles and cardboard signs. The police chief promised tougher enforcement. Everyone knew what that meant. More patrol cars in certain neighborhoods. More stops. More hands pressed flat on hoods of cars for people who looked a certain way. Isaiah's neighborhood sat right on the invisible line. One side had manicured lawns, Ring doorbells, and private security signs staked into flower beds. The other had community watch flyers taped to telephone poles and patrol cars circling slow enough to count every crack in the sidewalk. At night, crickets sang. Porch lights flickered amber. A siren whooped once across town and went quiet. A helicopter searchlight swept a neighborhood 2 blocks over. Routine, but never comfortable. The kind of thing you learn to sleep through, but never stop noticing. That evening, Isaiah and Jamal walked to a convenience store 6 blocks away for movie snacks. Chips, soda, maybe gummy worms, if the good ones were in stock. They walked side by side in hoodies and sneakers. Isaiah had his debate notebook in his backpack. They were laughing about something stupid Jamal said in class that morning. The street was quiet. Streetlights threw orange pools across the pavement. A dog barked behind a chain-link fence, then gave up. The air smelled like cut grass and cooling charcoal. Normal. Ordinary. Safe. And then headlights. A patrol car rolled past slowly. Isaiah glanced at it. Jamal kept talking. The car passed. Then it stopped. Then it reversed. Red and blue lights flashed to life. The spotlight hit both boys square in the face. Isaiah raised his hand to shield his eyes. The radio crackled loud, sharp, like something breaking. Two teenage boys, walking home with empty hands and full backpacks. And behind them, a police cruiser, lighting up the night, like the beginning of the end. Because that is exactly what it was. The driver's side door swung open. A boot hit the pavement. Then another. Officer Vance Hargrove stepped out like he owned the street. White, mid-30s, buzz cut so tight his scalp shone under the streetlight. One hand on his belt, fingers inches from his holster. His body camera blinked red on his chest, recording everything, though he did not seem to care. He walked toward the boys the way a dog walks toward a cornered rabbit. Slow, certain, already decided. Where are you two headed? Isaiah lowered his hand from his eyes. The spotlight was still burning into them. He could barely see the officer's face, just a silhouette and a voice. We just walked to my friend's house, sir, Isaiah said, calm, steady. Every word chosen the way his parents trained him to choose words in moments exactly like this one. We live a few blocks from here. Hargrove did not acknowledge a single word. He looked at Isaiah, then at Jamal. His jaw shifted like he was chewing something bitter. You match a description, 5 words. No explanation, no details, no probable cause. Just 5 words and a badge. And suddenly, 2 teenagers buying gummy worms were suspects. A description of what, sir? Isaiah asked, still polite, still measured. Did I say you could ask questions? Hargrove stepped closer. Close enough that Isaiah could smell the coffee on his breath and the leather of his holster. IDs. Both of you, now. Isaiah reached slowly into his back pocket and pulled out his school ID, Jefferson High School Junior. The photo showed a kid with a shy half-smile. Hargrove snatched it, glanced at it for less than a second, and shoved it back at Isaiah's chest. What about you? He turned to Jamal. Jamal's hands were shaking. I do not have one on me, sir. Hargrove stared at him, then pointed at the curb. Sit down. Do not move. Do not speak. Jamal sat. His sneakers scraped the concrete, 16 years old and trying not to cry on a public sidewalk, while a grown man with a gun told him to be silent. Hargrove turned back to Isaiah. Face the car. Hands on the hood. Spread your legs. Officer, I have not done anything. I said face the car. Isaiah turned. He placed his palms flat on the hood. The metal was warm from the engine. He could feel the vibration through his fingertips. His heart was slamming so hard, he was sure Hargrove could hear it. Be calm. Be respectful. Survive the moment. His father's words drilled into him since he was 12. The talk every black parent in America gives their child. Not about the birds and the bees, but about how to stay alive when a man with a badge decides you look like trouble. Hargrove unzipped Isaiah's backpack without asking. No warrant, no consent, no probable cause. Just a man in uniform going through a teenager's belongings like it was his God-given right. He pulled out the debate notebook first, flipped through the pages, handwritten arguments, research notes, highlighted quotes from Supreme Court cases. Hargrove looked at it like junk mail. Then he tossed it on the ground. The pages fanned open on the damp sidewalk. Weeks of work on the concrete like garbage. Isaiah flinched. He kept his hands on the hood and his eyes straight ahead. Hargrove kept digging. A pack of gum, a phone charger, a pencil case. Each item tossed on the ground one by one like he was daring Isaiah to react. Then he found it. A small red Swiss Army knife, 2 inches folded. A birthday gift from Isaiah's grandfather, his name engraved on the handle. Isaiah used it to sharpen pencils and open packages. Legal, completely legal, for a 17-year-old to carry in Virginia. Hargrove held it up to the spotlight like he had discovered a murder weapon. Well, well, well. His voice dripped with satisfaction. "What do we have here?" "A weapon. Sir, that is just a—" "Shut your mouth." Hargrove grabbed Isaiah's arm and yanked it behind his back. The cuff snapped around his right wrist, then the left. The metal bit into his skin. Too tight. Deliberately too tight. "Officer, it is a Swiss Army knife. It is legal. Please," I said. "Shut your mouth. You are under arrest." Jamal jumped to his feet. "He did not do anything. We were just walking. You cannot." Hargrove spun around and closed the distance in 2 steps. He grabbed Jamal by the collar and slammed him against the patrol car. The boy's head bounced off the metal with a dull thud. A thin line of blood appeared at his temple. "You want to join him? Sit down and shut up, or you are next." Jamal slid back to the curb, pressing his shaking hands between his knees, too afraid to wipe the blood running down his face. A second squad car pulled up. 2 more officers stepped out, both white, both calm, both looking at the 2 black teenagers like this was just another evening. Because for them, it was. 3 officers, 2 teenage boys, 0 crimes committed. And nobody stopped. Nobody rolled down a window. The neighborhood watched from behind curtains with the quiet understanding that this was how things worked. A convenience store 2 blocks south had been robbed. The suspect description: black male, dark hoodie, no height, no weight, no age. A description that matched half the teenage boys in Richmond on any given evening. The actual robber was a heavy-set man in his 30s with a neck tattoo and a scar across his left cheek. He looked nothing like Isaiah. He was already miles away, counting cash in a parking lot. Hargrove did not care about accuracy. He cared about numbers. He keyed his radio and spoke the words that would rearrange Isaiah's entire life. 2 suspects detained matching robbery description, one armed with a bladed weapon requesting transport. Armed with a bladed weapon, a Swiss Army knife with his grandfather's name on it. Isaiah stood in cuffs under the flashing lights and said nothing. Not because he had nothing to say, but because he knew at 17, he already knew that his words meant nothing here. His school ID meant nothing. His debate trophies and honor roll certificates meant nothing. Here, he was just a black kid in a hoodie. And that was enough. Jamal was released. No evidence to hold him. He stood on the sidewalk with blood drying on his temple and tears cutting lines down his face, watching his best friend get folded into a patrol car for the crime of buying snacks. "I will call your mom," Jamal shouted, his voice cracking. "I will call her right now." Isaiah looked at him through the window. The door slammed shut before a word could escape. The ride was short. Isaiah sat behind the mesh divider, wrists aching, the vinyl seat smelling like sweat and disinfectant. Through the window, his neighborhood slid past. The same streets, the same houses, the same porches. But tonight, they looked like they belonged to someone else's life. At the station, he was walked through a side entrance. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like trapped insects. The linoleum squeaked under his sneakers. "I would like to call my mother, please," he said. The booking officer did not look up. "Have a seat. You will get your call." He was photographed, front and side. The flash left white spots in his vision. He was fingerprinted. Each finger rolled across the ink pad until his skin was stained black. He stared at his own hands like they belonged to a stranger. He was placed in a holding cell, concrete bench, steel toilet with no seat, fluorescent lights that hummed and never turned off. The air tasted like bleach and something sour underneath. He was 17 years old. He had never been inside a police station in his life. "Please," he said again to the empty hallway. "I need to call my mom." Time passed. No phone call, no lawyer, no explanation. Just a boy on a concrete bench in a room that smelled like the end of everything, wondering what he did wrong. Then, the charge changed. Somewhere in the station, in a room Isaiah would never see, someone looked at the report and made a decision. Suspicion of robbery became armed robbery because of a 2-inch pocket knife with an old man's name on the handle. Armed robbery for a boy who was walking to his friend's house to watch movies. This was the moment the machine started grinding, not because evidence supported it, but because the system had a body and needed a case. And Isaiah Brooks, 17, black, wrong place, wrong time, wrong skin, was close enough. The gears turned, the paperwork multiplied, and a life heading toward college applications and debate championships was now heading somewhere much, much darker. The system moved fast when it wanted to, not fast for justice, fast for punishment. Isaiah's bail hearing happened soon after his arrest. Regina sat in the front row, wearing a blouse she had ironed early that morning. Her eyes were swollen. She had not slept. She had hired an attorney, a good one, and she believed her son would come home that day. The arraignment judge read the charge out loud: armed robbery. He looked at Isaiah over his reading glasses. Bail is denied given the severity of the charge and potential flight risk. Regina stood up. Flight risk? He is 17. He has never left the state. He is a junior in high school. Ma'am, sit down or I will have you removed. She sat, her knuckles turned gray, gripping the bench. Her son was being treated like a career criminal, and the system did not blink. It got worse. The attorney Regina hired discovered a conflict of interest and withdrew. Days before the preliminary hearing, Regina scrambled for a replacement, but time ran out. The court appointed a public defender. His name was Evan Collier. Collier met Isaiah once. The meeting lasted minutes. He walked into the visitation room with folders under one arm and a coffee stain on his tie. He sat down, opened the wrong file first, then found the right one. Isaiah Brooks. He said the name like he was reading it for the first time, because he was. Yes, sir. Collier scanned the page. He did not ask what happened that evening, did not ask about the search, did not ask about the knife. He closed the folder after minutes, told Isaiah he would do his best, and left. Minutes. That was what Isaiah's entire future was worth to the system. Isaiah was transferred to a juvenile detention facility. The transport van smelled like rust and urine. The handcuffs were chained to a bolt on the floor. The facility was a nightmare made of concrete, cold walls, steel doors that clanged shut and echoed for seconds afterward. Fluorescent lights that buzzed 24 hours a day, never off, never dimming. The sheets on his cot were thin as paper. The air smelled like industrial cleaner and sweat and something rotten underneath. Boys shouted through the walls at night. Someone cried every single night around the early hours. Isaiah never found out who. He lay on that cot and stared at the ceiling and thought about his debate notebook, the one Hargrove threw on the wet sidewalk. He wondered if the pages had dried. He wondered if Jamal picked it up. He wondered if any of this was real. Now, here is something important. Where was his father? Marcus Brooks was away. He had been there for days on a federal task force assignment. Classified briefings, restricted communications. His phone was locked in a security box many hours a day. He had no idea his son had been arrested. No idea his wife had been calling his office every hour, leaving messages that got more desperate each time. Regina called Marcus's chief of staff. The chief of staff said, "I will relay the message as soon as I can." That was earlier. By later, no message had been relayed. The audience does not know yet what Marcus does for a living. They only know he is Isaiah's father, that he travels, that he has important meetings, that his son needed him and he was not there. In the detention center's common room, a television mounted high on the wall played the news. A headline scrolled across the bottom of the screen, something about a state attorney general and a federal task force. Isaiah was not watching. He was sitting in a plastic chair, staring at the wall, pressing his thumbnail into his own palm, just to feel something besides fear. Meanwhile, the evidence that could free him already existed. The convenience store's surveillance camera had recorded the entire robbery. The footage was clear. A single adult male, heavy set, visible neck tattoo, mid-30s at least. He moved nothing like a teenager. He looked nothing like Isaiah. Officer Vance Hargrove reviewed that footage. He sat in a precinct office, watched the tape on a monitor, and saw with his own eyes that the man on the screen was not the boy he had arrested. He filed his report anyway. In the report, Hargrove wrote that the suspect matches the general physical description and that the recovered knife constitutes a deadly weapon consistent with the commission of the robbery. Every word is a lie. Every sentence is a nail in a 17-year-old's coffin. Hargrove knew. He did not care. His arrest numbers mattered more than a kid's life. The case file landed on the desk of Prosecutor Carla Voss. She was sharp, experienced. She read the file and noticed the gaps, the vague description, the lack of stolen property, the questionable search. She knew the case was weak. She pushed it forward anyway. Her conviction rate was high. She intended to keep it there. The trial was fast-tracked, and the case was assigned to Judge Harlan Whitaker. Let me tell you about Harlan Whitaker. White hair, wire-rimmed glasses, a portrait of himself, oil on canvas, gilded frame, hanging in the hallway outside his courtroom. He had sat on that bench for years. He called himself a guardian of order. Others called him something else. Here is a number that matters. Over his career, black defendants in Whitaker's courtroom received sentences that were on average more than twice as long as white defendants charged with identical crimes. The same offense, the same circumstances, double the punishment every single time. Nobody had done anything about it. Not yet. The trial lasted less than a week, and it was a disaster. Evan Collier, the public defender who had met Isaiah for minutes, called 0 witnesses. He did not introduce the convenience store footage. He did not challenge the legality of the search. He did not question Hargrove's report. He did not object to a single piece of evidence the prosecution presented. His closing argument lasted minutes. Minutes, for a boy facing life in prison. The jury deliberated for less than hours. They came back with one word: guilty. Isaiah heard it, and his legs buckled. The bailiff caught him by the arm. Behind him, Regina let out a sound that was not a scream and was not a word. It was the sound of a mother's heart being ripped from her chest in a room full of strangers who did not care. The courtroom was mostly empty. A few reporters, a clerk filing her nails. Nobody was paying attention to another black teenager being convicted in America. It was not news. It was an ordinary day. Nah, hold on. This part right here. Yeah, this one pissed me off. The evidence was literally right there on camera, and nobody even bothered to look. You got a public defender spending minutes on a life sentence. Minutes. And the system just did not care. I am not going to lie. This next part. Yeah, it had me shaking. Sentencing day. And now, we are back to where this story began. Judge Harlan Whitaker sat high on his bench and looked down at Isaiah Brooks. Orange jumpsuit, handcuffs. A boy who had lost weight since his arrest because he could not eat. A boy whose eyes had gone flat and empty, like someone had reached inside him and turned off the light. Whitaker adjusted his glasses. He cleared his throat and he gave a speech. The decay of values in our communities is a cancer, he said. Young men like you think you can terrorize decent, hard-working citizens and face no consequences. This court will not tolerate it. This court will make an example. Young men like you. He said it slowly. He said it looking directly at Isaiah's face, and everyone in that room understood exactly what he meant. The defendant is sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The courtroom gasped. Even Carla Voss, the prosecutor who had pushed this case through despite knowing the evidence was thin, looked shaken. Her pen slipped from her fingers and clattered on the table. She said nothing. Regina screamed. She lunged forward. A bailiff grabbed her by both arms and held her back. She fought him. This woman who spent her days saving children's lives now clawing at the air, trying to reach her own child. My baby did not do anything. He is innocent. Please, please, somebody help him. Nobody helped. Nobody moved. Isaiah stood motionless. Tears ran down his face, but he made no sound. His mouth was slightly open, like he had started to speak and forgotten how. His hands hung at his sides in the cuffs, and he stared at the judge with the hollow expression of someone who has just watched his own life end, 17 years old, life without parole, for walking to a store to buy gummy worms. And the judge did not blink. The bailiff stepped forward to take Isaiah away, and then the double doors at the back of the courtroom slammed open. Every head turned. A tall black man in a dark three-piece suit stood in the doorway. His shoulders were broad, his jaw was set like concrete. Two aides flanked him. Behind them, a Virginia state trooper in full uniform. The man walked forward, not fast, not slow. Each footstep landed on the marble floor like a gavel strike. The sound echoed through the silence. He did not look left. He did not look right. His eyes were locked on one thing. His son standing in chains at the front of the courtroom. Judge Harlan Whitaker leaned forward, irritated. "This is a closed sentencing hearing. Identify yourself immediately, or you will be held in contempt." The man did not stop walking. He reached the front of the courtroom. He looked at Isaiah, and for one single moment his composure cracked. His jaw trembled. His eyes glistened. A father looking at his child in handcuffs and an orange jumpsuit. Then he turned to face Judge Harlan Whitaker. He straightened his tie and he spoke. Not loud, not angry, calm, measured, every syllable sharp enough to cut glass. "My name is Marcus Brooks. I am the Attorney General of this state." The courtroom went dead silent. Not quiet. Silent. The kind of silence that has weight. The kind you can feel pressing against your eardrums. Marcus paused. He looked at his son one more time, then back at the judge. "And that boy you just sentenced to life in prison is my son." Whitaker's face drained of color, not slowly, all at once, like someone pulled a plug. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. His hands, which had been folded with such authority moments ago, began to shake. The prosecutor, Carla Voss, dropped her pen a second time. This time, she did not pick it up. She stared at Marcus Brooks, like she was watching her career burn in real time. Evan Collier, the public defender, sank so low in his chair, he nearly disappeared behind the table. The bailiff, who had been reaching for Isaiah, stepped back, then stepped back again. Marcus reached into the inside pocket of his suit jacket and produced a manila folder. He held it up so the entire courtroom could see. "In my hand is a copy of the convenience store surveillance footage, which this court never reviewed, showing clearly that my son was not the perpetrator. The suspect on camera is an adult male in his 30s, heavy set, with a visible neck tattoo. My son is a 17-year-old honors student who weighs 140 pounds. He set the folder on the table. I also have a copy of Officer Vance Hargrove's body camera footage. It shows an illegal stop conducted without probable cause, an illegal search conducted without consent or a warrant, and a fabricated arrest report that Officer Hargrove filed knowing that the evidence did not match." He let that sentence hang in the air. Then he turned to Carla Voss. His voice did not rise. "You will be hearing from my office regarding prosecutorial misconduct." Voss opened her mouth, closed it, said nothing. He turned to Evan Collier. "Mr. Collier, the state bar will be reviewing your handling of this case." Collier did not look up. Marcus turned back to Whitaker. The judge's hands were visibly trembling now. "Your Honor, and I use that title loosely, your sentencing patterns have been under review by my office for the past months. Today, you accelerated that timeline considerably." Whitaker found his voice, barely. Now wait. I followed proper procedure." Marcus cut him off, not with volume, with precision. "You sentenced a child with no criminal record to life, without parole, for a crime that the evidence proves he did not commit. That is not procedure, Your Honor. That is malice." Silence. Marcus turned away from the bench. He walked to his son. He removed his own suit jacket and draped it over Isaiah's thin shoulders. Then he wrapped his arms around him. Isaiah broke. Not the quiet tears from before. Not the frozen silence. He broke completely. Deep shaking sobs that echoed through the courtroom. His face pressed into his father's chest. His cuffed hands gripped the fabric of his father's shirt. 17 years of being strong, being polite, being calm, being respectful. All of it collapsed at once into the arms of the one person he needed most. Regina rushed forward. The bailiff did not stop her this time. Nobody stopped her. She wrapped her arms around both of them, her husband and her son, and the three of them held each other in the middle of that courtroom. And every single person who had failed Isaiah Brooks, the judge, the prosecutor, the public defender, the officers, the clerk, the system itself, watched in silence. Nobody in that courtroom moved for what felt like a full minute. The only sound was Isaiah sobbing into his father's chest and the hum of fluorescent lights above. Then the gavel came down, not from authority, from panic. Judge Harlan Whitaker slammed it once and choked out two words: court recess. His voice cracked. He stood so fast his chair hit the wall. He gathered his robes with trembling hands and disappeared through the side door. His clerk scrambled after him. Phone pressed to her ear, whispering fast. The courtroom erupted. Murmurs, gasps. Reporters in the back row reached for their phones. The words Attorney General rippled through the gallery like a shockwave. Carla Voss stood at the prosecution table, face the color of old paper. She smoothed her jacket, picked up her pen, put it down. Then, she walked toward Marcus Brooks. Mr. Brooks, I want you to understand. I relied on the police report. The evidence as presented indicated. Marcus turned to face her. He did not raise his voice. You had the surveillance footage request form in your file. You chose not to subpoena it. You had inconsistencies any first-year law student would have caught. You chose to ignore them. A 17-year-old with no record, no motive, no stolen property, and you prosecuted him anyway. He paused. I relied on the police report is not a defense, Miss Voss. It is a confession. This conversation is over. Voss picked up her briefcase with both hands. One alone was shaking too hard. She sat back down like a woman waiting for the floor to swallow her. Evan Collier did not attempt the conversation. He packed his files with his head down, walked out through the side door, and did not make eye contact with a single person. That was the last anyone in that courtroom saw of him. Within hours, Marcus filed an emergency motion to vacate the conviction, citing suppressed evidence, prosecutorial misconduct, unlawful search, and ineffective counsel. The special motions judge granted it before end of business. Isaiah's conviction was vacated. The cuffs came off. A deputy removed them gently, far more gently than they had been put on. Isaiah rubbed his wrists. Bruises, yellow and purple, weeks old. Regina held his hand as they walked down the courthouse hallway. Marcus walked on his other side. Isaiah still wore the orange jumpsuit. Nobody had brought him clothes. His father's jacket hung over his shoulders like a shield. They pushed through the front doors. The sun hit Isaiah's face, and he stopped. Just stopped. He closed his eyes and breathed a long, slow, shaking breath, the kind you take when you have been holding your lungs tight for weeks and finally let go. The air smelled like warm concrete and cut grass from the courthouse lawn. It was the most beautiful thing he had ever smelled. Reporters had gathered at the bottom of the steps. Cameras flashed. Microphones pushed forward. Voices overlapped. Attorney General Brooks. Isaiah, can you comment? Isaiah did not speak. He was not ready. Marcus stepped forward. His voice was steady, but underneath the composure, you could hear the fracture. A father who almost lost his son. My son is coming home. The justice system failed him completely. We will make sure it never fails another child this way. That was all. He put his arm around Isaiah. Regina took his other hand. The three of them walked down the courthouse steps together. Behind them, inside the building, Officer Vance Hargrove received a phone call. The AG's office had flagged his arrest report. Hargrove's first reaction was denial. I followed procedure. The kid matched the description. When told the body camera footage contradicted every word of his report, he went quiet. He was placed on immediate administrative leave. Badge and weapon collected. His union released a statement calling it politically motivated. Nobody believed it. What happened next did not take weeks. It took days. Because when the Attorney General of a state turns his eyes on your courtroom, your precinct, or your case file, the walls start closing in fast. Marcus Brooks did something important first. He recused himself publicly, formally. He stood in front of cameras and said, "This is my son's case. I will not oversee the investigation personally. I am appointing a special prosecutor to ensure complete independence and transparency." Some people called it noble, others called it strategic. It was both. The special prosecutor's name was Vivian Cross, a former federal attorney with a reputation for being thorough, relentless, and completely uninterested in politics. She took the case on a Monday. By Friday, the walls were already caving in. Her team pulled Officer Vance Hargrove's personnel file first. What they found inside was a pattern so clear it could have been drawn with a ruler. Multiple prior complaints of racial profiling, filed by citizens over years. Black men stopped for matching a description. Black teenagers questioned for looking suspicious. A black woman pulled over multiple times in 1 month on the same road because Hargrove said her taillight looked dim. Every single complaint had been reviewed internally by the department. Every single one had been dismissed. The words unsubstantiated and insufficient evidence appeared in the files so often they might as well have been stamped there in advance. Multiple complaints, zero consequences until now. Next, Cross pulled Judge Harlan Whitaker's sentencing records. Years of data, thousands of cases. Her analysts ran the numbers, and the results were devastating. Black defendants in Whitaker's courtroom received sentences that were on average more than twice as long as white defendants convicted of identical charges. Same crime, same circumstances, same criminal history, double the punishment, exposed in a spreadsheet that would eventually be projected on screens across the country. But it was not just the numbers. Cross found individual cases that made the pattern personal. A white college student convicted of armed robbery, sentenced to years, suspended. A black father convicted of the same charge, same amount stolen, no prior record, sentenced to years. Same judge, same courtroom, same crime. Years versus years. Whitaker had been doing this for years, and not a single person in the judicial system had stopped him. Then Cross turned to the prosecution. Carla Voss's case files were subpoenaed. The review uncovered a pattern of suppressing exculpatory evidence, evidence that would have helped defendants in cases involving minority defendants. In Isaiah's case specifically, Voss had access to the surveillance footage request form and chose not to pursue it. She had notes in her own handwriting, flagging inconsistencies in the officer's account, and she had crossed them out with a single line and moved forward. Her own notes convicted her. Finally, the public defender's office. Evan Collier was not a monster, he was a symptom. The investigation revealed that his office was operating at high capacity. Collier was handling over many active cases simultaneously. He did not fail Isaiah because he was cruel. He failed him because the system made it impossible to succeed. Minutes was not laziness. It was all he had. That fact made it worse, not better. Now, the media. Investigative journalist Carolyn Shaw at the Richmond Herald had been following the case since the courtroom reversal. She had filed public records requests, interviewed witnesses, and obtained the body camera footage through a source in the department. Her story dropped on a morning. The headline read, "Honor Student Sentenced to Life Inside the System That Almost Destroyed Isaiah Brooks." By that afternoon, it had been shared many times. Before long, every national outlet in the country had picked it up. Cable news ran segments around the clock. The body camera footage was broadcast on every major network, and people saw everything. Hargrove's hostility, the illegal search, the debate notebook thrown on the wet ground, Isaiah's calm, quiet compliance, Jamal's blood on his temple, the cuffs snapping shut on a 17-year-old boy whose only crime was existing while black on an ordinary evening. The public response was massive. Protests formed outside the Richmond courthouse within hours. Thousands of people, handmade signs, candles. Isaiah's debate teammates organized a student-led rally at the state capitol. Hundreds of high school students standing on the steps chanting his name. The hashtag trended nationally for days. Then came the trials. Officer Vance Hargrove was indicted by a federal grand jury. The charges: filing a false police report, civil rights violations under federal statute, unlawful search and seizure, and falsifying evidence. His attorney argued that Hargrove was following standard department procedure. The jury did not buy it. Guilty on all counts. Sentenced to years in federal prison, permanently banned from law enforcement in any capacity in any state for the rest of his life. When the sentence was read, Hargrove stared straight ahead. He did not blink. He did not speak. The handcuffs went on his wrists, and for the first time in his career, he was on the other side of them. Judge Harlan Whitaker's case went to the State Judicial Oversight Commission. The hearing lasted days. The evidence was overwhelming. Years of data exposed case by case, number by number. Whitaker's attorney argued that sentencing disparities were within judicial discretion. The commission disagreed. Whitaker was removed from the bench, the first sitting judge in the state to be removed in years. A federal civil rights investigation was opened into his full tenure. His oil portrait was taken down from the courthouse hallway. The nail hole remained. Prosecutor Carla Voss was disbarred. The state bar cited a pattern of prosecutorial misconduct, including suppression of exculpatory evidence and failure to disclose material inconsistencies. The Brooks family filed a civil lawsuit against her personally. She did not contest it. Evan Collier was not criminally charged, but Isaiah's case triggered a statewide audit of public defender funding and caseloads. The results were damning: understaffed, underfunded, and overwhelmed. Collier resigned quietly. He never practiced law again. Weeks after Isaiah's release, the actual robber was identified. His name came from the surveillance footage that had been available from the very first evening. He was arrested at a motel miles outside Richmond. He confessed within hours. The man who actually committed the crime had been free for over a month, while a 17-year-old honor student sat in a cell for it. Governor Patricia Ellis held a press conference. She signed an executive order mandating 4 immediate reforms. First, independent review of every sentence Judge Harlan Whitaker had issued during his years on the bench. Second, mandatory inclusion of body camera footage in all case files before prosecution. Third, maximum caseload limits for public defenders statewide. Fourth, mandatory racial bias training for every sitting judge in the state. Over many of Whitaker's prior convictions were reopened for review. In the first wave alone, multiple defendants were released. Men who had served years, some decades, for sentences that never should have been imposed. Multiple men walked free because one boy's father walked through a courtroom door. Months later, a Saturday morning in spring, the dogwoods along Isaiah's street were blooming white and pink, petals drifting across the sidewalk like confetti. Nobody had to clean up. Isaiah sat on his front porch, the same porch where he had carried Mrs. Coleman's groceries a lifetime ago. His debate notebook was open on his lap. Not the old one, a new one. The old one had been recovered by Jamal the night of the arrest. Dried out, pages wrinkled, but intact. Isaiah kept it on his bookshelf now. He never wrote in it again. But on the first page of the new notebook, he had written one line in black ink. They tried to bury me. They did not know I was a seed. He went back to school. He did not talk about what happened unless someone asked, and most people were smart enough not to ask. His teachers noticed he was quieter. His counselor noticed he sat with his back to the wall in every room. Some things do not heal on a schedule. But he showed up every single day. He showed up. In spring, he competed in the state debate championship. His topic one he chose himself, was the presumption of innocence and the color of justice. He stood at that podium in a borrowed suit and spoke for minutes without a single note card. His voice did not shake. His hands did not tremble. He spoke about the system not as a victim, but as someone who had seen it from the inside and refused to look away. He won first place. Standing ovation. His mother cried in the third row. His father watched from the back, arms crossed, jaw tight, eyes shining. Isaiah was accepted to top universities that fall. He chose to study law, not because his father was a lawyer, but because a public defender once spent minutes on his life, and he swore no one would ever sit across from a kid in a visitation room and call that justice. Some evenings, Isaiah and his father sat together on the porch. They did not always talk. Sometimes they just sat. 2 glasses of lemonade, the sound of crickets, the streetlights clicking on one by one. Marcus would put his hand on Isaiah's shoulder. Isaiah would lean into it just slightly. That was enough. Some things do not need words. The ripple effect spread far beyond that porch. Jamal Cole became a community organizer before he finished high school. He started running Know Your Rights workshops for Black teenagers across Richmond. He taught them what to say during a traffic stop, how to record an encounter, when to stay silent. The things nobody should have to teach a child, but everyone has to. Regina Brooks co-founded a legal defense fund for juveniles facing wrongful charges. In its first period, it took on cases. Many resulted in reduced or dismissed charges. Marcus Brooks announced that his office would publish annual sentencing disparity data for every judge in the state. Full transparency, no exceptions. The policy was adopted by other states within the year. The Richmond courthouse installed a permanent plaque in the main lobby. Brass letters on dark marble. Justice is not just a verdict, it is a commitment. Isaiah walked past it once on a day he came to speak at a youth legal clinic. He stopped, read it, touched the corner with his fingertip, then kept walking. All right, real quick. Yeah, the story I just told, that part is made up. But the profiling, fake reports, judges, nobody questions. Yeah, that is real. That happens every day, especially to kids who do not have someone powerful walking through that door for them. And that is the part that gets me. How many times has this already happened and nobody came? So, let me ask you something. If Isaiah's father had not been who he was, if Marcus Brooks was just a truck driver or a janitor or an unemployed man who could not afford a lawyer, how does this story end? Drop your answer in the comments. I want to read every single one. If this story made you feel something, anger, sadness, hope, anything, hit that like button and share it. Not for me. Because somewhere out there, a kid like Isaiah is sitting in a cell right now. And the only difference between his story and this one is that nobody with power showed up. Subscribe if you want more stories like this. Stories where justice does not just exist on paper, it shows up in the room. Because here is the truth. Justice should not depend on who your father is. It should depend on who we are. All of us.